Welcome to another edition of Flex Rental Solutions how-to videos. Today we're going to be going over the system configurations that will allow you to configure statuses, workflows, workflow jobs, and element types. This is really one of my favorite areas in Flex. We designed this to be as customizable as possible. Our customers start off with some very unique or default type settings that allow their workflow to be executed along for quotes and things like that. As an example, I created a very quick workflow here of what things start out as. In general, a quote for a new customer starts out in the inquiry stage. This has a status that tells it that it doesn't create conflicts, etc. And from there, we can move from, say, tentative or confirmed or canceled. So what these areas are, these boxes are what we call workflow states. These connections that connect from one state to the next are what we call workflow actions. When we go down one of these arrows, you can execute a workflow job, meaning that if I change this from tentative to canceled, I run this action, but part of this action, I can execute a job that says, I want to email a group of people that says, oh, by the way, don't worry about this job, it got canceled. And each of these states that we land in has a status that gives it its properties. So those are the four main concepts here. States that have statuses, actions that connect from one area, from one state to the next, and workflow jobs that when you go from one state to the next, you can execute a specific workflow job. So let's go into Flex and look at how things look from a user's point of view. I'm going to log into our what we call Bootstrap, which is this is what the system is when you log in for the very first time. It is a blank canvas, as an example. So let's first look into system statuses. We go to System, Status Options. Part of our mentality is everything is configurable. These are just statuses that we have created, give them specific names, and given them specific characteristics. In the default system, we have a status called confirmed. If we open it up, this is the name. The creates conflicts tells the system when I'm looking at availability, should a job in this state create conflicts, meaning if I've got only one of these items and one job is in inquiry and has one of those items in it, and we have a second job that's in a confirmed state as we are here that creates conflicts and has one item in it. If we look at the item that is, or the job that's confirmed, it's going to create a conflict and show negative, or you'll have just enough. The item that doesn't create conflicts, if we open up that job, will actually show -1 because there's another job out there that's reserving that item. And if we were to confirm the non-conflict creating job, then we would have two items that is creating a secondary conflict. Closed status allows us to have different jobs be closed and open. As an example, we use Flex as our internal billing system. We have a state for an invoice called invoice paid. That state is we mark it as closed. So when we go to say our projects and invoices, by default when we look at all of our invoices, it will only show us open invoices. So it looks like here's everything waiting for us to bill. If we want to view everything that's both open and closed, there is what we call include closed, which means show us everything. So if we want to look at a month and show me everything that we have billed, whether it's still waiting to be paid or paid, then we hit includes closed. If we want to look at what's waiting to be billed or has yet to be billed and paid, then we would not check this item. So that is what you can use to basically reduce the amount of clutter on these pages. If you want to reduce that clutter, you would create a state that is a closed state and create a workflow that gets you to the point where that item's closed. There is also a status called locked. There are certain people who say, if I create an invoice for a quote, I want to lock that job, meaning you should not be able to make changes to it. So if you have a state that says generate invoice, you may want to move the status to a state that locks it. Locks availability is for certain availability instances. We have the ability to say, while I am prepping a job, I've got two equipment lists that are functioning side by side. I've got my pull sheet that is showing me what I need to pull. And as I start to scan it, it is creating a manifest that says, I've started to scan out these items. Well, we may want to lock the status of a pull sheet until we are completely done prepping it, meaning don't take availability from the manifest until I'm completely done, because until it's done, I don't want to say, if I just scan one speaker and we've got 10 speakers, don't put the availability on the manifest yet. Just say I need 10 speakers until you've done scanning out all 10 of those speakers. You can also assign a status of background color, text color, border color, fun stuff like that. All that relates to is when you go to the calendar and you look at this status color, that relates to this setting right here. So that is status options. Second, we'll go to projects and workflows. This is where we can create specific workflows and how they work from one area to the next. As an example, we've got this quote workflow right here. That's the name. You can give it a description. When we start this workflow, it should start in the inquiry state. What you'll have here is the list of states. If we go back to this page here, these square boxes are our states, as a reminder, and the arrows are the actions. So as an example, if we start in this inquiry state, here's the information about this state. Right now, we keep them very simple and just say we're going to associate a status with this state. And for simplicity's sake, a lot of times our status have the same name as the state. We'll get into this on a later review, but for now, if we look at the state, the outflow actions, these are the three actions that we can take to get out of this state. We can either cancel it, confirm it, or set it to tentative. If we wanted to create a new workflow action, we'd click that here. Let's take a look at what happens when we go from inquiry and execute a workflow action called confirm quote. So we're going to click on this. First of all, this name is what will appear in the link in the workflow. So as an example, if I go to new quote and we'll start a test job, you'll see that it's starting in inquiry. I'm going to put down some dates real quick. And you'll notice that the workflow options, cancel quote, confirm quote, or set to tentative, relate back to these three workflow actions. So this is our three options that we've configured so far. Again, back to confirm quote, that's the name. If we rename that, then that name would show up here in these three options. The confirmation screen can give us some feedback on what we've done. There are some good reasons to have confirmations. There's some bad reasons to have confirmations. If you're going from, say, inquiry to quote, you don't necessarily need the system to say, oh, by the way, what you just did, confirm the quote. Yes, you just confirmed the quote. It's kind of redundant. If you have a workflow for an invoice where you export it to QuickBooks, there may be some confirmation that's very helpful for you to view. Did it go successfully? Were there any errors? Typically, there's never an error when you go from inquiry to confirm. It's just maybe who got emailed. But if you're already setting who got emailed originally, do you need to be reminded of what you just did? The majority of our customers on typical workflows for quoting have confirm screen set to enabled, meaning don't remind me what I just did. What we see here is that this workflow action takes the state of inquiry and moves it to confirmed. So what we're doing right here is it's this workflow action, changing it from inquiry, from inquiry to confirmed. That's exactly what this is doing. Change to type. This is a specific option in your system. What types are is we have an element that we named a quote. Well, let's just generate a PDF. And so what you have here is it is printing up on the very top that this is the element name of a quote. Well, we have certain customers who want to change this header up here to say, this is only an estimate because right now it's in an inquiry state. And once we move it to a confirmed state, we may want to change this to a contract. And we can do that for element types. So if we go to projects, projects, element types, I can create an element type and call it estimate and hit create. And I'm going to create a second element type and call it contract. And what we can do on this workflow is say, let's refresh this because there's some stale data here. And we'll say, if we go from inquiry to confirmed, I want this to change its type to what's called a contract and hit update. The last configuration to do types is under project element quotes. We are going to go to status options and enable these two types for this. And then you can also put the default should start out as a contract. So now on new quotes, when we start out a new quote, when we print it out, it'll print out as an estimate. Oops, did I do that right? I want this to default as an estimate. There we go. So when we start out a new quote, it'll print out as an estimate. But once we confirm a job, and generate the PDF, we've now changed the name. Now, the one thing to think about when we do things like this is there's always two sides to the road. So what we said is when we go from inquired to confirmed is we want to change the element type to a contract. Well, what happens if we go from confirmed back to inquiry? Something that was ago, the people said, oh wait, it may not happen. So what you typically need to do with that is to reverse that action through the workflow. So if I go to confirmed and I open up a workflow called reset to inquiry, that's the name of the link. We're not going to confirm what we just did. We're going to change it from confirmed to inquiry. And we want to change it back to contract. So now when we go back to here, our workflow has now changed because we are in a new state, and these are the 5 new options. So if I reset it back to inquiry, and I generate the PDF, and now it's back to an estimate. So these element types allow us to change the name of the header through workflow actions. Another thing that we can do with these workflow options is chain them to parents. Right now, we only have the ability to modify a parent status or state when you execute a child action. So as an example, if you had an event folder, and as a child element to that event folder, you had a quote, and you want to say, if ever I confirm a quote, I may want to update a workflow action to say, I want to change my event workflow to a workflow that exists to confirm the quote or to confirm the event. So this allows us to do 2 things at once. When I confirm the child quote, it will now execute a specific workflow to update any parent element event folders to a confirmed state also. Down the road, we're going to look at offering options to pushing workflows or chain to child elements. The only problem is, as of right now, we haven't programmed that, because if you have an event folder and 4 quotes, maybe only one of those quotes was confirmed and the other 3 are canceled. Maybe you give them 4 versions. Right now, if we had that functionality and we said, oh, automatically update all my quotes if I confirm the event folder, it would automatically confirm all 4. It wouldn't know which one of the 4 to confirm. So that's why we have it just to parent action items as of now. The executor group allows us to create a workflow that only specific groups of people can see and execute. So as an example of this, if we were in our invoice workflow, or no, let's go back to our quote workflow. We have a state called ready to invoice. And there's a workflow that says generate the invoice. If I only wanted my accounting department to be able to do this, meaning the account managers or anyone in the warehouse couldn't, I could say I want accounting to only be able to execute the workflow called generate invoice. So the way that functions is, if I were to take this quote, and we're going to work it through here to say we want to confirm it. We want to flag it as ready to invoice. What you'll notice here is I do not belong to the accounting group. So the only 2 workflow actions that I can execute is I can still update the pull sheet, or I could reset it back to confirmed. If I log into someone who belongs to the accounting group, they would have that 3rd workflow action called generate invoice. So that is the functionality that allows us to inhibit specific actions to specific groups of people. So that's executor group. Inflow jobs and outflow jobs are ways that allow us to launch specific workflow jobs when things are executed. Inflow says whenever anything comes into here, that it launches this one. Outflow job is when I go from ready to invoice, say out to created, then it will generate that. So what these jobs are referring to is under projects and workflow jobs. As an example, we've got a workflow here called quote confirmed. This is what's called a simple email notification. This is the name of the job. It's going to be coming from just a simple web address called no reply at Flex Rental Solutions. Auto means anyone who is the account manager or who has executed workflow items in the past, they are on the distribution list and they'll be automatically included on this list. If we want to take auto off and just put on a specific email to say, anytime someone confirms a quote, I want to be notified. I want to be on that list. And we could add a comma. And now this would go to both Christine and support. I highly recommend when you use these workflows as you modify them and they're going to large groups of people, that instead of putting 10 different people on here, that you might want to use your email group functionality. Say if you've got Exchange or Google Groups, you may create a email address called operations@flexrentalsolutions.com, and then in your email group you could say who belongs to that group. So in the workflow, you don't have to update this every time someone leaves or gets added to the account managed group or the ops group. You just make that group in your email application and update it there. The subject, which you'll see here, these are what we call substitution tokens. Right now it's saying, go and get the definition name of this element. So right now, if we go to projects, project elements, quote, we've called it a quote. Well, we've got people who use this and call it a contract. We've got people who are in different languages who rename these. So what happens is this workflow job that we've created automatically goes and whatever you've named it, use that name right there. Whatever number is assigned, fill that information in there and marked has been confirmed. So all these items inside these brackets are pulling data out of the system and putting it into this email template. So as an example, I'm going to reset this back to confirmed. And let's hit flag is ready to invoice. I'm the account manager, so I'm on the distribution list right now. I could add other users, add a contact, or just manually type someone in. Quote is pulling out the data from the database. It says go and find the element name and fill that in. Go find this actual element number and put that in, and then is ready to invoice. So these are all the substitution tokens that these workflow jobs are referencing. So the way this was executed, if we're at confirmed and there's a workflow called flag is ready to invoice, it's going from confirmed to ready to invoice. Right now we're not changing any type. We're not linking it to any parent action item. Anyone can execute it. And there's an outflow job that says when it reaches ready to invoice, launch this job. And here's the job, definition name, number, etc. So this is all the detail that gets executed when we go through and execute that action going from the state of confirmed to the state of ready to invoice. So, as a review, this was the original state. These are the outflow actions. going from one state to the next, executing the job, and then it winds up in this state ready to invoice. We're in a new state, 3 new outflow options. One of these outflow options is inhibited to only accounting, as an example. There are other times when we need to execute a workflow but not change the state. What I mean by that is if we go to a state called confirmed, we have this one workflow action item called create and update pull sheets. Let's take a look at that. This is the link that shows up in the workflow. It's not being confirmed once we execute it. And you'll notice that the source state and the target state are exactly the same. What it's going to do is basically loop around itself. So just in this, we're in confirmed state. It's going to go around the block and come back right to itself. What we're allowing it to do is as it goes around the block, it's going to execute 2 outflow jobs. One, it's going to generate a pull sheet or update it. The second, it's going to execute an email that will email the warehouse people that we have generated a pull sheet. So instead of going from state 1 to state 2, it's state 1 back to itself. Anyone can execute it. We're going to send out an email notification, and we're going to update the pull sheet. So that's an example where workflow reverts back to itself. We have specific customers who have created workflow that says, I want to create an email that just notifies people that I've made some changes. So the way they can do that is under workflow jobs. They would create a new simple email notification. There is a from address that you can use called user, all capitals, that will basically fill in your email address so it'll come from you instead of no reply. To you might want to put, ops, oops, can't type. Subject, and we could grab some specific information here that says, quote, number has been changed. I'm just going to type that in right now. And then we can fill in all this information. These substitution tokens are right over here, so we could grab whatever detail we're trying to pull out of the system and drop it in there. Here's the link. And what I'll probably do is grab all this information right here from a different workflow and hit create. So now we have a new workflow job, and if we are in a confirmed state here, we can say, I want to create a new workflow action. I don't need a confirmation. It's going to loop around from confirm to confirm. We're not going to change the type. We're not going to do any executing. Anyone can do it. But the outflow job will be notify users. And now we'll hit create. So when we go back to this state, there is a new workflow action called notify of changes. So if we go back to this quote, and let's see where we are in our step, we are confirmed. And let's refresh this whole quote now. And we are going to go back down here. So now we have a new action. This is a workflow action that would go out to ops. That would just say, pull out the data, and it will provide a link. So that now, just like the quote can update a pull sheet and just leave at the same state, we could also create a workflow that will literally just notify the users of changes with the link, but leave it in the same state that it started at. So that's how you could create a notifier process in your workflow item. Now, the final area that we want to touch on workflows is how we can document things internally. So as an example, when we look at this workflow, this is all really based upon the client state. We think it's inquiry, we're waiting to hear back from the customer. It's tentative, they said it's probably going to happen, we're still waiting to hear. It's confirmed, it's canceled. What we have happen with a lot of our customers is they'll have weekly meetings where they'll go over a list of all the jobs that are happening in the next 2 weeks. And they want to see what's going on with this job. Well, a lot of times those meetings talk about, well, have we finished the quote? Has someone reviewed it? Example, has the business owner reviewed it and approved it or something like that? So as an example, we have one customer that we made lots of changes to theirs. What they were looking to do is have very specific internal operations that were verified. So they had an internal operator who wanted to look at the operations side. Did all the labor and trucking get added and billed appropriately? Does ops know about it, and have they verified that it looks good? From there, they wanted to submit it to a department head for review. Now, anytime during this process, it may have to send back to the customer for new specs. They do a lot of touring, and they want to review, hey, does this, what we quoted, they decided that they wanted to change the spec of the tour, things change, and we're waiting to hear back from them. Again, this is all great information when you're looking at planning stuff. Instead of just knowing, is it inquiry, tentative, canceled, or confirmed, this allows them to say, hey, the ops guy is still reviewing it, basically. This is where it's stuck. Or down here, they have a state called pending customer approval, which basically says, we've completed all of our internal reviews and approved it, and now it's sitting and waiting for the customer to approve it. And all these can link to confirmed. And then we did specific stuff that says only specific people can mark it confirmed. Lots of things like that. So to review what we did for them is we created a new status. In the workflow, we created a new state. From the state, we created a new action that linked to specific other states. So these just show you some of the options that we can offer as we can help you diagram your workflow process internally to help you understand where things are. One final note is we have done specific workflows relating with locks. So as an example, we could create a workflow that says when it's confirmed, it's locked. Well, what I hate to do in workflows is have what we call dead ends, meaning I can't get out from anyone. In here, it always went to generate invoices and stuff like that. But if a workflow was locked and no one can change it, we may want to create a specific workflow that could unlock it, that administrators might have the specific permissions to execute that item. And so what we mean by that is if we go back to this workflow and say the invoice was created and it locked up this quote, we could create a link from the state called unlock for changes, and it would put it maybe back in confirmed, and the executor group is only an administrator. And we've got other people who will actually create a system setting or a status offering called locked. It'll create conflicts, create a state called locked, and then actions to get into it and actions with executor group permissions to get out of it. All this is a way to create specific functionality in the system of who can do what, where is it, what state's it in, is it locked, is it confirmed. I hope this gives you a good overall view on the concept of workflows, statuses, workflow states, workflow actions, and the different executor groups that can do that. If you have specific questions on how you can better utilize the customization process in our system, please contact support at flexrentalsolutions.com. Thank you very much.